Hello there. Are United Nations peacekeeping troops helping Hezbollah terrorists in their war against Israel? It may sound preposterous, but when well-stocked, Hezbollah terrorist-based tunnels are a stone's throw away from United Nations peacekeeping bases in Lebanon, one has to wonder what the f*** is going on. According to press reports, the Israeli Defense Forces have uncovered Hezbollah tunnels very close to UN peacekeeping outposts in southwest Lebanon. What were the UN peacekeepers doing while people were outside their bases digging tunnels and equipping them with spying gear and ammunition? With the IDF claiming that the Hezbollah terrorists are effectively using peacekeeping troops of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, or UNIFIL, as human shields. But unlike with Hamas using children as a shield in the Gaza Strip, the UN troops operating in Lebanon are armed, have an international mandate, and can defend themselves, and can call on massive backup. That would therefore make the UNIFIL peacekeeping troops willing human shields, wouldn't it? Partisan human shields. And part of that UNIFIL international mandate includes the prevention of Hezbollah terrorist activities within their area of control. Yes, don't fall for the mainstream pro-Palestine press that tries to portray the UN's job as keeping Israel out of Lebanon. No, there's so much more to it than that. The UN's job in Lebanon is to ensure that there will be no weapons or authority in Lebanon other than that of the Lebanese state. That's from UN Resolution 1701. But that is not what the IDF has unearthed, with one expert saying there was enough ammunition in one area to supply 2 battalions. So when you hear that Israel is not too chuffed with the UN in South Lebanon, you'll now get an idea as to why. Because what the IDF found strongly suggests that the UN is very keen to keep Israeli troops out of the South Lebanon border area, but are somehow blind to the existence of Hezbollah all around them. Hezbollah terrorists that are right under UN noses spying on Israelis and shooting rockets at them. According to the Telegraph, for example, the IDF found 2 tunnels by the border, one using cameras to spy on Israeli villages and the other for launching anti-tank missile attacks on those villages. And the IDF said there were another 100 or so tunnels just like these within just 1 square kilometre sized area. And the Telegraph said that one of those tunnel openings was within 100 yards of a UN watchtower. And UNIFIL has been operating in the area for decades after being set up back in 1978. You'd therefore think they would know the players and activities in their area by now, wouldn't you? And here's where the UN in Lebanon has failed. UN task: disarm all armed groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon. Fail. Not happened. The only reason that Hezbollah has been degraded is because of Israeli activities, like the exploding pagers. UN task: no armed forces in South Lebanon except the government of Lebanon and UNIFIL. Well, that's an obvious fail given the existence of these Hezbollah tunnels. Task: ban foreign forces from Lebanon. Fail, because Iran military top brass seem to be quite happily wandering around the place. Task: prohibit unauthorised arms sales or transfers. Fail, because we've all seen the press reports of Iranian and Russian munitions coming into Lebanon to then be used in rocket attacks on Israel. Task: full control of Lebanon by the Lebanese government. Don't make me laugh. Full-on fail. Hezbollah controls Lebanon. Task: Israel to withdraw from Lebanon. That was the only task achieved. until those previous UN failures forced the IDF to re-enter Lebanon to stop the constant Hezbollah missile attacks. And now since October the 7th last year, we've seen 8,500 or more rockets fired by Hezbollah from Lebanon into Israel, displacing tens of thousands of Israelis as well as killing and injuring civilians. Now the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, that champions a strong US-Israel relationship, says that Hezbollah has turned major Lebanese cities, including the entire area south of the Litani River, into a military fortress from which it can attack Israel, in blatant violation of UN Resolution 1701. Today, many Lebanese cities are a Hezbollah maze of underground bunkers, rocket launch sites and interconnecting tunnels, with at least one out of every 4 houses in some areas reportedly hosting a Hezbollah base, post, weapons depot or hideout. And although Hezbollah has a handful of seats in the Lebanese parliament, it is not part of the official government of Lebanon. But it does have its own army, a very large and well-equipped army that is thought to be larger and more powerful than the Lebanese army itself. A body that should have been dismantled under UN Resolution 1701, but it seems to act with impunity, especially where the United Nations itself is concerned. It seems that the might of the international community has decided to back the terrorists, or is at least too frightened to get on and fulfill their mandate. No wonder Prime Minister Netanyahu told the UN to get its troops out of harm's way immediately in the Lebanon. Someone has to go in and clear the terrorists out before they launch more attacks on Israel right under the noses of the UN. Just like all those tunnels have been built over many years right under the noses of the UN. And if only a portion of all this is true, it proves the UN has lost all credibility as a peacekeeping force, or worse, is partisan and picks and chooses what it will or will not enforce. Two-tier seems to be a recurring theme in the modern world, despite having all these wonderful international organisations. But while the UN has been failing in Lebanon by allowing Hezbollah to build a huge military structure of tunnels, spy posts and firing positions around its own bases and watchtowers, it's also increased the risk of UNIFIL troops being dragged into the direct line of fire. Either by stupidity or by design, the UN has allowed itself to be used by Iran and Hezbollah. Iran and Hezbollah has used UN inactivity to draw Israel into South Lebanon. And all it would take now is a firefight where UN troops are killed and injured, and the chances of conflict escalation increase manyfold. But that will not be on Israel. That will be the fault of the UN itself for not fulfilling its mandate. If the UN can't or won't stop Hezbollah building tunnels and amassing rockets and ammunition in Lebanon, which are then fired at Israel, then Israel has no choice but to act in self-defence. It appears that the UN has allowed Hezbollah to breach its own Resolution 1701 for years, if not decades, while insisting that the only party that must obey that resolution is Israel. The UN operations in Gaza and Lebanon have not covered themselves in glory. It seems to me that the UN takes the view that the likes of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis and Iran must be given every opportunity to prosecute their war with Israel. And if that's the case, the UN is not a body intent on world peace. As far as I'm concerned, the UN is yet another international body that was set up with good intentions, but as ever with these things, it is falling apart under the weight of geopolitical reality. The UN has now passed its sell-by date.